Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do.
But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long-snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy.
They're just gonna remember some guys now.
You can't do that. Dallas penalty number 10. 2 minutes for Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players, past and present. Hey there, folks. It is me, James. I'm going to go serve my minor here in the sin bin, so let's see who's going to kill this penalty.
Well, it's not going to be me because I'm going to be serving a game misconduct myself. Diaz back with you once again. So it's going to be a 5-on-3, but we've got quite the penalty killer to head our defense. Please introduce yourself.
You know, that's right. It's me, Chris Kreider. I'm just going to stand on the halfway line and get a shorthanded goal because that's what I do. Best
Hockey's
defense is a good offense.
Year, man. Hockey's going fucking great this year, Xavier, isn't it?
It's very good. It's very good.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and start making memories. You know what else is good? We're going to talk about it, man. Henry Kissinger's dead. It fucking rules. I'm going to find a way to talk about this on this show because goddamn, Henry Kissinger died last night.
I know exactly how you can talk about it, James.
There's two specific ways that we can talk about it. There's two things I'm going to say. First, I want to start by saying I had texted all of you yesterday at about noon. I was just thinking about two of my least favorite people in the world, Elon Musk and Henry Kissinger. Asked Xavier and Diaz, hey, if you could kill one of those guys with a button, which would do it? Neither answered, so neither indemnified themselves, and even if they did, I wouldn't snitch on them now.
Neither of us incriminated ourselves. We did
there
not
we go.
Indemnify different thing.
I'm so glad we have a lawyer here. So I positive, of course. Kissinger's probably out the door any day now. And Elon Musk still has the potential to do a lot of very stupid things. And God, not 9 hours later, Henry Kissinger was dead and Elon Musk had basically told Bob Iger to go fuck himself at a New York Times conference. So I need to think of more of these moral quandaries on a regular basis, is all I'm saying.
Did you see the Yankees statement?
I want to get to the Yankee statement. I want to say one thing real quick about his sporting upbringing, because Henry Kissinger, born in Austria, very big soccer fan growing up. And I want you to think for a moment about what it takes to grow up as like this young, passionate soccer fan who's defying Nazi rule, like risking getting bullied and beaten in the streets just to still go and attend soccer matches in the midst of Nazi. Like, think about what it takes to start there and still become as hated as Henry Kissinger is. My God. And as Xavier put it, real recognize real, evil recognize evil. The one sporting franchise who sat around today and like waited until today, didn't do it right at that moment last night, waited until halfway through the day. The New York Yankees said, you know what? God damn it. People need to know what our opinion on the death of Henry Kissinger is. A lifelong friend of theirs. I will point out all of the Yankees championships ever won during Henry Kissinger's lifetime. His dark magic is what has propelled this evil empire for nigh on a century. Hopefully this is a fall of two deeply malevolent entities in the world twinned together. Hopefully the Steinbrenners keep him company soon. And I'll just leave it at that. That's what's making memories for me right now, baby.
We'll send the Yankees to Cambodia.
Listen, let it be said, Henry Kissinger was a fraudulent statesman. He would not have lasted 1 week in FDR's time. Not 1 week.
I want to know Stephen A. Smith's opinion on Henry Kissinger more than I want like anything in the world. I want to hear Stephen A. Smith talk about Henry Kissinger for like 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, I think we would get some of the greatest content, and I hope that is bequeathed to us soon. But you know what? We got a good one for once, folks. So yeah, that's it for me. How you guys doing?
Correction for our Austrian listeners. Don't worry, we don't. He is not actually one of yours. He was born in Germany, in Bavaria, in Fürth.
Okay. My sincerest apologies to the people of Austria. Truly.
Look, apologies to Austria, but let me tell you one person we don't owe an apology to, or one city. The city of Paris, and primarily its most famous footballer, Kylian Mbappe, are owed no apologies because their performance against Newcastle was an absolute disgrace. I have never seen a team with more talent beg the referee for more calls in a stretch of 90 minutes. And I forget the guy's name. It's the same name of the referee who did the World Cup final. He is allegedly the best referee in the world. For 94 minutes, he did a great job. And in the moment that the ball struck Tino Livramento's elbow after hitting his body, he made the right call on the field. But when the entire PSG team surrounded him and VAR said to go have a look, he did not have the cojones to stand by his call. And that is the only reason I am not celebrating the greatest win in the history of Newcastle right now. It is a 1-1 draw. Newcastle is very alive in the group of death as we enter the final match day, which is an achievement in and of itself. However, we started a fucking 17-year-old in the Parc des Princes. And not only did that 17-year-old Lewis Miley play his ass off for the full 90, not only did every player that played play their ass off for a full 90, because Newcastle, of the 7 subs that they had 2 goalkeepers. Every other team only has 1 on the bench. They had 3 U19 players, 2 of whom had just made their debut against Chelsea because we were beating them by so much. And then we had Paul Dummett, who's played twice in the past 16 months. And we had Lewis Hall, who has made 20 senior appearances in his entire professional career. We had no bench. We had 17-year-old Lewis Miley with his very stereotypical British boy haircut. It's kind of like an ugly bowl cut thing. It's not very pretty. His play was incredible, though. He stripped Mbappe clean at least twice that I can remember. And the kid is only 17 years old. They played their asses off. They are very alive going into the final match day. God, PSG, if the gods of soccer exist, they will not allow PSG to go through. They just won't, and they can't.
So 2 things. One, I believe this is pronounced, I'm looking at the name, Szymon Marciniak. I think that is the name of the referee.
Yeah.
Regardless, the fact that I've also, like, all the last couple of days heard about how Kylian Mbappe is dipping out on the team in the near future through transfers, and that the only way he could score, again, against a team that, as much as you love them, send out a lineup that wasn't necessarily expected to prevent that kind of scoring. 26 shots!
And let me just put in a note here as well. We have 14 first-team players currently out for injury. We could have an entire 11 and 3 players off the bench.
That's all of your subs. That's an entire game's worth of players.
And I'm not even talking about Sandro Tonali, who was banned for 10 months for gambling, which is oddly relevant to our Maverick Carter not really breaking news. And it took a fucking PK that, honestly, if Nick Pope was a split second quicker, he would have saved. Mbappe put it very central. But it's going to be very simple going into match day 6. PSG draw or lose at Dortmund, and Dortmund does have to play for a result to guarantee that they finish top of the group. So they have to go into Dortmund and get a win. If they don't get a win, Newcastle is through with the win against AC Milan at home on the final day. What a scene it'll be, because it's going to happen, because God is real, at least when it comes to sports, and God will not let Kylian Mbappe see heaven. He will not let him see the knockout round. And here's another thing. I've said before on this podcast, I want Newcastle to throw all the money at Mbappe when he hits the transfer market. That offer's expired, Mbappe. You're no longer welcome. Afterwards, he said Newcastle had nothing today. Newcastle had a goal from open play, which you didn't. You fucking piece of shit. You can stay your ass in France. Maybe get the guy from Ratatouille on your head so you can learn how to score from open play, because that's the only way that you're ever going to find the goal against Newcastle, you piece of shit. Fuck Kylian Mbappe.
It's very hard for me to not now picture Patton Oswalt actually riding around on Kylian Mbappe's shoulders. I was going to say something else, but now I'm just thinking about that.
Patton Oswalt was great in that movie. Do you ever see that movie, Fan? Or like Big Fan?
With the New York Giants, like Psycho?
Yeah, he's like a radio caller whose like entire life revolves around calling in at like 6:30 a.m.
That character fucking loves Tommy DeVito. That character is finding new lease on life with Tommy DeVito.
Oh my God. I'm an Eagles fan and I'm rooting for Tommy DeVito. How can't you? a millennial king, starting quarterback for the Giants, still lives at home with his parents. You gotta love it.
Well, Xavier, I gotta know, what do you love right now, or hate, whatever the particular tone of the memory might be?
Well, we got a little bit of revenge for Diaz and Newcastle because Arsenal beat Lens 6-0, which is the biggest ever win by an English team over a French team in European competition. So, a little bit of revenge there against the French. They should have thought before messing with England. 6 different goal scorers, pure domination. Arsenal topping their Champions League group and topping the Premier League table right now. So that's great. Rangers.
Tell me more about what Arsenal is topping, please.
My heart. Rangers topping the NHL table, which is phenomenal. A big fan of that.
Topping you on the table. Okay, cool.
The Knicks have made it to the quarterfinals of the in-season tournament, which means that if the Knicks win, it is the greatest tournament of all time and by far the most respected and important trophy. If they lose, who the fuck cares? It's bullshit anyway. It's brand new. No one respects that shit, and fuck the Milwaukee Bucks. But we'll see how I feel about that next week. But the thing I really want to talk about is that yesterday I watched possibly the dumbest college basketball game of all time. I watched Temple versus LaSalle in the new Big Five Classic. For those who don't know, this year they changed the format of the Big Five, where they split it into 2 pods of 3, which each team playing each other, and then the standings of those pods would then face each other in a triple header at the end, 1v1, 2v2, 3v3. Temple had already previously beat Drexel, not part of the Big Five, but now is allowed in as part of City 6, the traditional Big Five plus Drexel. And yesterday we were playing LaSalle for a chance to be in that quote-unquote championship game. Temple could not shoot the ball whatsoever. They shot 7 of 34 from 3, which is 20%. And until very late, it was in the single digits. They shot 67% from the free throw line, missing 15 different free throws. But in a triple overtime game where 10 players fouled out, including Temple's entire starting 5, Temple did win 106-99. One of LaSalle's players played all 55 minutes.
Also, let it be said that the name of LaSalle's best player is Brickus.
Yeah, and he played 53 minutes until he fouled out in triple overtime.
Well, can we just ruminate on that? The name of the best player on a basketball team is Brickus.
It's like when
Brickus.
Eric Balfour was leading the Rays bullpen. It's like, I'm just saying, I don't think that's the right name for a guy to be pitching in high leverage situations.
Hey, you know what? Brickus is a Chester County guy. He's local. We can't hate on Brickus too much. But
what high school?
I think he was in Coatesville.
Ooh, Coatesville. Richard Hamilton. They're one of our rivals.
It doesn't matter because they lost. LaSalle lost. Also, again, 10 players fouled out in this game. Temple were playing guys that had not seen the court ever, and so was LaSalle. And our guys who had not seen the court were just better than theirs. Big shout out to Quante Berry, who came off the bench late in regulation and then played pretty much the rest of the game. So despite not seeing the court until nearly the end of the game, played for 21 minutes and put up 13 points and 4 boards when we had no other ball handlers because everyone else had fouled out. And Steve Settle, who transferred from Howard, who went 19-16 and somehow, despite playing 50 minutes, did not have a single foul in a game where 10 people fouled out, while also hitting the game-tying 3 at the end of overtime to send it to double OT.
Well, the 3 that he hit, it's very rare that you see both a collegiate team have a coach that draws up a good out-of-bounds play and then B, the team executes it. That was a beautiful inbounds play. It was a cross-court pass to an immediate handoff for an amazing play design to just get him an open 3. And granted, it was like 5 feet behind the 3-point line, but it was a wide open 3 when you needed a 3, which is, I'm all in on the Adam Fisher era. I'm all in.
And we get to now face off against St. Joe's to see who will win the inaugural Big Five Classic. So, fuck St. Joe's. Let's go Temple. Fuck Villanova, because Villanova is now 0-2 against Philly teams and undefeated against everyone else. Once again, proving that they are not a true Philly team. Still very fun. Very stupid game, but I enjoyed watching every second of it.
We're all in on the Adam Fisher era. I think it's official to say that we're all in on that era, but we have some other things to talk about today, don't we, James?
Fuck, that was good. Yes, we do. So after last week when we talked about our category that was very based on style, I'd been wondering for a while about approaching kind of the guyness of officials. And there was something about when we talked about these categories where it was really, officials giving the scores. The fact that all three of them were sports that kind of built that really made me think about that human element of regulation. And I think it is interesting to transition from those very stylish guys that we talked about to a role where, like, ideally you are not really noticed. The officials themselves just should not really factor into anything. I think we all agree that is ideally what we want to see when we see sport. Like, it exists there, the structure of law and order is there, and they're the avatars of it, but ideally them just being there kind of is all that is needed to keep things between the lines. There is, I think, no particular official role that better suits the discussion of being in the background than an umpire in baseball. Great ones, they are barely perceived. And we've come across my guy before. I think this is interesting. We have not perceived the guy that I want to talk about today, but he has drifted through the stories that we have woven around here, blending in as the embodiment of this order that we take for granted. And so while he has been there all along, I do today want to formally bring forward my guy, Dave Phillips.
Dave Phillips.
Dave
Okay,
Phillips.
I thought for a second when you said baseball umpire, I was thinking because he has an epic mustache and he also has an epic blown call that he was immediately contrite about. Jim Joyce, I thought might have been ready to go.
I am fascinated by Jim Joyce, and I think that what he has done with Galarraga after that game is like one of the top tier ways that he could have possibly handled it. Like, Jim Joyce is a cool dude, but perhaps Jim Joyce is just a dude. Dave Phillips, though, I guarantee is a guy. And he's a guy who gets started out on October 8th, 1943 in the St. Louis area. He grows up in Jennings, a few miles away, and it's a small town of 12,000. I cannot find a single major leaguer that has ever come from Jennings in the history of baseball. So he's got a love of baseball growing up, but I think we can safely say he probably didn't have a lot of illusions about making the big leagues. But he has seen how you can still be involved. His dad, Bob, was an umpire in the minor leagues when he was growing up. And so when he's 20 in 1964, he's playing at Southwest Missouri State University, and you can go to this school, a different school, an umpiring school in Florida, get your certification and start working up the ranks. He finishes third in his class. That is correct. He is a third place champion at umpire school while he is there.
Love that bronze, baby.
he gets that bronze and he gets his card. This is great, actually. I got a lot of information for what I'm going to talk about today from retrosheets.org, which has incredibly arcane umpire data. I'm so glad that someone was thinking to collect this. And a lot of the old umps, they have a little paper card that was literally getting punched every year that they continued to exist in the different leagues. And it has all their minor leagues listed because, like the players, they got to work their way up. So for Dave Phillips, he in 64 and 65 starts in the Single A Midwest League. We've got some teams like the Michigan City Whitecaps, the Cedar Rapids Red Raiders, and we got the Fox City Foxes. 66 and 67, he's bumped his way up to AAA. He's in the Texas League now. The Arkansas Travelers play there. They're still around. The El Paso Sun Kings. The Dallas-Fort Worth Spurs, though. That is a deeply cursed minor league team. I am very glad that they no longer exist.
Wasn't the Arkansas Travelers Mitch Canham's team?
I believe that is the case. I believe that is where Mitch Canham was for a bit.
Arkansas Traveler legend Mitch Canham is his full title, actually.
And perhaps, no, he would not have even remotely lined up with Dave Phillips. But the legacy of umpiring laid down by Dave Phillips in the Texas League carried through there. That legacy then continues in 68 and 1969, nice, when he goes to AAA, East Coast International League. They have the Buffalo Bisons there, the Rochester Red Wings, and the Jacksonville Suns, who have now become the Norfolk Tides. All of the way, he is two things. He is exceptionally young at all times. He's gotten into this at a very young age, and he's very, very good. He's moving up pretty quickly. In 1971, he finally gets a chance to continue being exceptionally good and exceptionally young in the American League. I want to take 1 second to talk about umpiring just a little bit more broadly for anyone that does not know the nitty-gritty of the crews and stuff. It is more or less as old as baseball. 1879 is when the National League president at the time, William Hulbert, he appointed a 20-man crew to the league. It was the first ever one, and currently in Major League Baseball, we're up to 19 four-man crews, 76 total umps. They are all umpires, but there is one crew chief in each group of them. That is the head honcho, but they all rotate through the 4 primary positions. Sometimes they'll expand to 6 in the playoffs, but most of the time you've just got your home plate ump, or the umpire in chief, which is another official term for it. And then you've got first base umpire, second base umpire, third base umpire. There are left and right field ones, as mentioned, sometimes in the playoffs. And there are also replay officials that work remotely for many of the leagues now. But largely in baseball, those 4-man crews are the core of umpiring. And so Dave reaches the majors. He begins to work his way into those cores. His first ever game, it's a Royals at Angels game on April 6th, 1971. He's at third base. And a little bit under 2 months later, he is at second base for a May 29th game between the A's and the Red Sox. He calls Reggie Jackson out in the 6th inning, and Reggie Jackson is pissed the fuck off. He spikes his helmet at the ground. This is Dave Phillips' first ever ejection as an umpire. Want to make sure to note that. There are no off days for umpires during this season, so all in all, Dave Phillips is at 173 games, which does beat out any player. 72, don't have any highlights from that. I do have some in 73. Nolan Ryan had a very good year in 1973. 383 strikeouts, which beat Koufax's record. One might say it topped it. 17 of those strikeouts come on July 15th, 1973. This is a no-hitter. I do have to specify, because Nolan Ryan does throw 2 no-hitters in 1973. They're separated by about 2 months. Dave Phillips is on first base for that second one, which is a gem. While Nolan Ryan managed 2 no-hitters in 2 months, pretty impressive. Not quite Johnny Vandermeer, but quite impressive. Dave Phillips just goes 15 days before he sees his next no-hitter when he is at first for a no-hitter thrown by the Rangers' Jim Bibby. Not someone I'm particularly familiar with, but credit to him, he was there, as was Dave Phillips. In 1974, Dave Phillips makes it to the playoffs. He is there for the Battle of the Vowels between the A's and the O's in the ALCS. And one of those teams loses, and we're moving on to 1975. Big move for Dave Phillips. He and a couple of colleagues, Don Denkinger and Merle Anthony, they are the first umpires to wear the inside the shirt chest protectors in the American League. So they're no longer wearing the big blocky slab in front of you. They're now putting those kind of tactical police bulletproof vests underneath. Followed up the next year with his first ever World Series appearance in 1976. It's Reds-Yankees. 77, it's his first All-Star game, again in New York, enjoying the company of the Yankees. Then it is time for the big time. In 1979, he is all set to become, after working his way up here, a crew chief. And in 1979, we have an unprecedented umpire strike. One umpire at the time, Ron Luciano, he put it out, the umpires have kept this game honest for 100 years. This is roughly 100 years after the introduction of umpiring. And while they are at this point signed to a contract through the Major League Umpires Association, which had been formed in 1970 after a very brief one-day strike, this is the first time that they're really pushing back in 9 years, at which point things have exploded in all of televised sport. At the time, Richie Phillips, no relation to Dave Phillips, he knows the umps are dissatisfied. There are 52 of them at the time in the league, making somewhere between $17,500 and $39,000 a year, which is admittedly $70,000 to $150,000 in today's money. But what you got to look is the day by day that they're making compared to other officials in the different leagues. The treasurer of the MLUA at the time points out that NBA officials make about $450 to $500 a game. NFL officials make $700 a game. MLB officials make a paltry $180 a game compared to the other two at this time, with only a $53 daily stipend to be on the road for an entire season. And one thing I want to point out, this Washington Post article, incredible how much more writers used to like take owners to task. My God, it is so nice to like read this in the Washington Post. I spend $60 a day as a reporter on the field. You're trying to tell me the umpires can do this? Baloney, Major League owners.
James,
Really
they don't have the ability to do that anymore because half of them aren't real.
Yes, I know.
AKA, if you've seen the Sports Illustrated expose about
God,
how
yeah.
a bunch of their writers are all AI, and the fucking Temple LaSalle write-up on ESPN is also written by AI. So to see an actual write-up, I had to go to City of Basketball Love, because at least I know those are actual writers doing it and not just whatever the heck that they called it. It was like Spark something that they say did the data for it.
And the robots clearly can't talk any shit. Like, the robots are not going to be able to talk any shit on the Otis because they're not programmed to. And, like, I don't think the Treasurer is talking shit here. The Treasurer continues from the picket line. It would cost the teams only about $20,000 a year each to meet the demands of the umpires. And if you haven't guessed by me leaving this Treasurer nameless, it is indeed Dave Phillips who is serving in this role, being in a position where he's got a family now. You know, he had married his high school sweetheart, Sharon, in 1973. They're starting to build their family that'll eventually have 3 kids, Kim, Jill, and Randy. Dave Phillips is still going to go out on the picket line as the treasurer of the union, having just made crew chief, fighting for this. And eventually it works out for them, because the only thing that sports fans hate more than the officials is replacement officials. So after the umps are just very bad, MLB eventually capitulates, and they do get this major win for the profession of umpiring. Once the strike ends, the 1979 season goes forward. In May, there's a Tigers-White Sox game. This has nothing to do with Dave Phillips initially, but it can't be played, so it gets rescheduled to a later date when the Tigers and White Sox are again playing in Chicago. Forms a double header that day. There is someone who owns the White Sox this time. Our old friend Bill Veeck, which does also mean, for what it's worth, Nancy Faust is in the stadium this day in 1979 on July 12th, when, in order to fill some time in between, they do a promotion that we have discussed before called Disco Demolition Night, wherein a popular radio host convinces people to get in for 98 cents, the radio station being 97.9, if they bring a disco record to explode in the middle of the field between these two doubleheaders. My friends, it is Dave Phillips, the crew chief that day, who steps onto the field after this explosion happens and destroys the playing surface and renders this game unplayable. So that is his part there in Disco Demolition Night. It was one of the first times that, again, Dave Phillips has been here in the background as we discuss these guys. But, you know, we just didn't know. Now we're taking this further look as we move into the 80s. Try and fast forward through a couple highlights for Dave Phillips. 1982, been over a decade in the league at this point. It's his 4th year as a crew chief. He's not known as a big ejection guy. He's had about 3 to 4 of those a year. But there is this pitcher who's been throwing long since before Dave Phillips came into this league. He is a 2-time Cy Young Award winner, and he is the single most notorious spitballer of all time, Gaylord Perry. At this point, he's 43 years old and with the Seattle Mariners. And on August 23rd, 1982, Dave Phillips, he's behind home plate, gives him a warning when he sees a ball at one point midway through the game, in about the 5th inning. He says, hey, there's some foreign substance on that. Cut that out. In the 7th inning, Gaylord Perry has not cut it out, and Dave Phillips tosses him, which is the first ever career ejection at the age of 43 for Gaylord Perry, referred to in the press. Again, this is not like a historic, he was the most notorious spitballer of all time. His contemporary personality was as being blatantly, in his own interviews, the most notorious spitballer of all time. In 83, we have another famously postponed game. The George Brett pine tar incident occurs this year. And once again, this does not initially involve Dave Phillips. When the Royals are in New York playing the Yankees, trailing late, George Brett hits a home run. Yankees are big mad. Billy Martin complains about the amount of pine tar on the bat, which there are rules for. This is largely for the aesthetics of the game and not for any kind of advantage. But it is technically against the rules. And so Brett is tossed. He is ruled out. Game is initially over until American League President Lee MacPhail steps in. He says, nope, we are going to overturn that. That was a home run. You guys are going to continue this game, this final inning of a game. You're going to do that at some point late in the season. The Yankees bitch and they moan. But the game is eventually resumed. Martin immediately has his team throw to first base because he wants to contest that George Brett did not run the bases. Lee MacPhail had anticipated this, along with some of his assistants. He had gotten a signed and notarized affidavit from the 4 umpires that day. And stepping forth from the dugout is the umpire this day, Dave Phillips, the crew chief, who presents this affidavit to Billy Martin that does proclaim that they have all said, yes, George Brett did touch all the bases. Essentially, Billy Martin cut this shit that we knew you were going to try out and play this fucking game for 1 inning, which they do. And it ends up not mattering. The Orioles go to the World Series and win anyway. Continuing through his career in the 80s, there is, I want to point out, in 1987, a second 43-year-old wily veteran pitcher on the mound. And if I had a nickel for every time that he had to toss one of these guys, I would get my second nickel now is Joe Niekro, longtime knuckleballer, drops a piece of sandpaper from his pocket while he is standing on the mound. Dave Phillips is forced to eject him yet again for this. It's only happened twice, but it's weird that it has happened 2 times at the exact same age. We enter the 90s and we do see a couple more familiar faces. A big moment for every umpire is a benches clearing brawl that they have to manage. His first one is in 1993. It's really his only one, August 24th that year. A's versus the Brewers. Brewers in the midst of a huge 9th inning rally, and Dennis Eckersley, pitcher for the A's, really not liking the calls that he's getting from Dave Phillips. Complains and he complains, and manager Tony La Russa for the A's also comes out and complains. Chan, blah, 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 blah. And then the Brewers manager now is complaining about how long this is taking, about the delay of game. And he and Tony La Russa get into a bit of a fracas. Benches entirely clear. And in this, we've got a couple familiar faces. O's legend BJ Surhoff, who I've mentioned many times because he has one of the greatest names of any O's legend, gets absolutely bloodied by a punch from Edwin Nunez. Like one of the most real punches I've ever seen in a baseball fight. But the other person I have to point out is the other Brewers catcher, in addition to BJ Surhoff, Dave Nilsson, who is there watching as Troy Neal jumps through the air and spear tackles Dickie Thon directly in front of him. And also Scott Brocious is in the background. He's not in the middle of that scene right there as Dave Nilsson is. But Scott Brocious is just also there. And Dave Phillips ejects several players after this. I think it should not be surprising.
I like to think of Dave Phillips as just being like, come on, like, I don't want to eject you guys, but like, you're not really giving me a choice here. Like every time he does it.
Yeah. Like, and I mean, surely that's the craziest thing that's going to happen, right? It is July 15th, 1994. And this is another one we've talked about extensively. Dave Phillips is behind home plate for another weird game in Chicago. There is a member of the visiting Cleveland team that we've discussed at length. In the middle of this game, Albert Bell, first inning, breaks his bat. And the middle of that bat looks a little funny to the Chicago manager, so he asks that it be claimed, and that is taken by Dave Phillips and locked in the umpire dressing room. Do you guys happen to remember who goes and retrieves that bat by Mission Impossible style, scaling through the ceiling?
I forget the name, but I remember the story.
Yes, it is Hall of Guy inductee Jason Grimsley. Scampering on up there. Years before loading the 2005 Orioles full of steroids, he does go and get that bat stolen from Dave Phillips before eventually returning it when Dave Phillips makes it clear there are going to be serious consequences.
Almost got away with it too. If it wasn't for those meddling kids.
Grimsley does eventually, as we've mentioned here on this show, come clean in 1999. 1999 is the last big year I want to discuss regarding Dave Phillips. And I need to again bring up Richie Phillips. Still no relation. Richie Phillips is a Philly guy who had played and coached football at Nova and then just decides to become a lawyer. And initially he's a public defender. Then he revitalizes a freight company. He gets a bunch of money. He's like, all right, cool. I think I'm going to go into being a union advocate in sports now. Specifically, he ends up with officials law at the time. That 1979 strike when they had a major success, but since then they have soured on Phillips in a big way. He had held a similar position in the NBA and had previously gotten kicked out of that. They let him go due to thinking that his demands were unreasonable and none of the owners were ever going to meet them, which is maybe a little bit of foreshadowing for what happens now with the umpires. In fact, some union members, including Dave, 14 of them had tried to block his reappointment as the chair, but he does get it again in 1999. This is in February. It is a winter of discontent for the umpires, but for Richie Phillips, it is a glorious summer by a son of a bitch named Sandy Alderson, who's VP with MLB. He starts a fight with him and all of the umpires because that same month, without input, MLB decrees, hey, umpires, make the strike zone 2 inches shorter. They do not ask the umpires their opinion on this. They do not let the umpires know they're thinking about this. They just demand that. In April, Alderson also now says, hey, more teams should start charting your performance. Now, sure, we do generally like that nowadays there are ways to see how umpires are performing. But you can understand how that is not sounding good from Alderson here just 2 months after changing what their strike zone is. And then in June, an umpire bumps a player and he gets suspended. This is the first umpire suspension of the modern era. And all of this has just provided Richie Phillips with this rallying cry. So in July, he gets all of the umpires together. July 14th in Philadelphia. There are 68 umpires and Richie Phillips in this meeting. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is a 69-person meeting wherein they discuss this plan. It says, hey, look, guys, I think you should all sign a letter declaring that you are not going to sign the renewal of your contracts, which do happen in about mid-September. 57 of them signed this. Dave Phillips is among them. And Richie Phillips immediately crows about this. He makes it incredibly public this is happening, and it very quickly becomes clear the league more or less anticipated that Richie Phillips is going to do something stupid like this and is ready to call him on this. They are ready to accept the resignations of several of these umpires that they do not want to keep in because Richie Phillips sent in these letters. Dave Phillips is one of several who are like, hey, this was a tactic. Here's a direct quote. Most people in that room thought they were going to be signed but not sent. It's from the New York Times, where he is also quoted, it was never told to the guys in the room that this was irrevocable, that guys were literally resigning their jobs immediately. Some of these resignations are taken, some are not. All in all, 22 umpires lose their job because of this, including Joe West. Though obviously, since we know Joe West, some do get their jobs back. But the Major League Umpires Association is decertified due to this fucking fiasco that Richie Phillips started, eventually getting replaced by what exists now, the World Umpire Association. Dave is a special case in all of this. He had actually had a back injury earlier in 99. He didn't return that season. He is not technically considered one of the 22. He does return in 2001 to finish out just a little bit more of the career. And now, actually, because of the joint league structure of how the umpires have been set, we have a first for him on April 6, 2001. He's at third base in Montreal against the Mets for his first ever National League game. That is the last full year of his career. He plays one opening day in Cincinnati the next year, not plays, umps. And that wraps it up. From 1971 to 2002, he umped 3,933 games. 2 All-Star games, 3 ALDS, 6 ALCS, and 4 different World Series, 2 as the crew chief. 4 additional no-hitters to those 2 that he saw in 73, a half dozen no-hitters in his career, 88 ejections altogether. What I love the most, though, about Dave Phillips is that most of these stories that I have told are not about Dave Phillips, and I would not look you in the eye and say they were. That would be a lie. They are good stories that are connected by Dave Phillips. And again, I think common complaint about refs is that they insert themselves. Dave is ideal. He is a background. He is just this infrastructure, the trestle upon which we let the vines grow. He never leads, but maybe he guides with a firm hand, like a good official should. Anyway, that is why Dave Phillips is officially this week my guy.
I love that he's in the background of all of these like famous moments, but like not really inserting himself into them, just kind of like calmly making the right decision as each thing comes up. Because I mean, that's all you can ask for from an umpire, right?
Yeah. And of course, I admit this is fully, my interpretation of what an official should be. And I think we often agree on that. But of course, there are some differences, and I would love to hear what some of those additional interpretations are.
Yeah, so some officials don't like being the center of attention. I like to think my guy didn't like being the center of attention either, but he did find himself in a lot of situations. Obviously, I think the best thing you can say for an official, right? They don't come up with the rules, they just enforce them, and they try to enforce them as fairly as they can. In boxing, I think this responsibility is perhaps most important. Obviously, when it comes to stopping a fight, if a fighter's in danger, you want to have somebody in the ring that's able to protect the fighters and look out for them. But even in the fights where the circumstances are less dire than that, the referee has a lot of control over the fight. Is he going to allow infighting? Is he going to break up clinches early? Is he going to let them fight inside? Is he going to protect the fighters if they're going for low blows or illegal punches. Having a good referee in the fight often can make the fight. The guy I want to talk about, largely unimpeachable, very highly regarded throughout his career. And that's a large reason why he got to officiate over 100 championship bouts throughout his career. But it's his secondary career outside of the ring that helped to get him as well known as anything. I want to talk about the man who came to be known on TV as America's Judge. He was the third man in the ring when Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield. He also officiated countless celebrity death matches. I want to talk about the pride of Reno, Nevada, Mills Lane.
I definitely didn't know that was there for the Holyfield Tyson fight. That's 100% news to me already.
He was, and we're going to have a few more very unique moments to go over in Mills Lane career. But
I would expect nothing less.
But first of all, Mills Lane is the third of his name. He is Mills B. Lane III. And that is B as in a honeybee is his middle name, B-E-E. Was born November 12th, 1937 in Savannah, Georgia. Not to Mills B. Lane II. He was born to Reamer and his mother, Louise. His grandfather was Mill Lane I. His uncle was Mill Lane II. He's Mills Lane III. The family is a wealthy family. Reamer comes from a very wealthy family. Mills B. Lane I owned the largest bank in all of Georgia. Mills B. Lane II, Mills B. Lane III's uncle, was the president of a bank that would later be merged into what is now known as Bank of America. So
you're saying that he's a Nepo baby and we have to hate him immediately?
No, Xavier. I'm saying exactly the opposite, because Reamer himself rejected the family business. He did not go into it. He instead was a farmer who raised cattle. The money, I would be lying if I said the money didn't help at least a little bit, because he does go to a boarding school in Concord, Massachusetts for high school.
Ooh.
Those ain't cheap.
Those ain't cheap, but he's a sporting fellow while he's away at the Middlesex School in Concord, Massachusetts. And even though he's only 5'7", weighs about 150 pounds. He is the starting linebacker on the football team, and he's the goalie for the ice hockey team. So already not afraid of getting himself in there, putting himself in precarious situations. Where he really rejects the Nepo baby is coming out of high school. He graduates. He obviously has a sitting job offer to join the family business, come work in the bank, make a lot of money and not have to work hard in your life. Mills Lane rejects this. Instead, he enlists in the Marine Corps. He would serve 4 years, and while in the Marines, he begins to develop his passion for boxing. The armed forces, there's often a lot of competitions, a lot of boxing going on among them, so he's listening to the big fights on the radio while he's also fighting. He is stationed in Okinawa. While there, he wins the Marines All Far East welterweight tournament. So just matches against other Marines that are stationed throughout Japan, Korea. He wins the welterweight championship for all of them. Gets discharged 1959, and he's going to take advantage of the GI Bill. He's going to enroll at Nevada. While there, he joins the boxing team. Not the boxing club, the boxing team. At this time, boxing is an NCAA recognized sport. They have championships. They have everything. Very similar to how they have wrestling, where you have your different weight classes, and our welterweight fights your welterweight, our middleweight fights your middleweight, so on and so forth. Add up all the points at the end. One team wins, one team loses.
How long did that last? Unless we'll get into that.
So we will get into that.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
It was founded around 1923, but in 1960, Mills Lane is a freshman. And he goes on to win the NCAA welterweight title his freshman year, 1960. Unfortunately, Mills would not get an opportunity to defend his belt because 1960 was the last year that boxing was competed and recognized as an NCAA sport. Because
you say unfortunately, I say Mills Lane is still to this day the reigning NCAA championship boxer.
This is very true. He is undisputed. He is the defending NCAA welterweight champion. The reason why the sport was disbanded is the unfortunate, because Charlie Moore was a middleweight for the Wisconsin Badgers, and he fought in the middleweight championship bout. He lost, got hit a lot in the head. 8 days later, passed away from his injuries. So that led to the NCAA no longer recognizing the sport. There are collegiate boxing matches that are still fought. The current governing body is the United States Intercollegiate Boxing Association. There's a few different schools that fight in that. Georgetown is one of them. Cal used to fight in it. And since 2013, they've governed the sport. It is still unrecognized by the NCAA to this day. So to your point, James, Mills B. Lane III, the reigning defending NCAA welterweight champion. Without a collegiate belt to defend, he's still very interested in continuing his boxing career. So he's fighting a number of amateur bouts. He goes 41-8 as an amateur, but obviously the pinnacle of amateur boxing is the Olympics. So he tries out for the 1960 U.S. Olympic team. He makes it to the semifinals of the tournament, where he loses and is unfortunately knocked out. But he gets pretty far. If he wants to go for another Olympic bid in 1964, he's going to be 26 by that time. So instead, he decides, you know what, it's time to go pro. And in 1961, he fights his first professional match. He gets TKO'd by Artie Cox. 0-1, not a good start. Professional, a little different than amateur. Does win his next 5 fights, 4 of those coming by knockout. He gets the rematch with Artie, and he avenges it with a 3rd-round knockout. Wins his next 3 fights in a row to go to 9-1. He's a bit of a promising prospect, but takes a break for a little bit because this whole time that he turned pro, he was still going to Nevada, and he earned his degree. He graduated with a degree in business in 4 years. From there, now he's a college man. He's got his degree. Very interested in boxing still, wants to stay around the sport, but also wants to not get punched in the face. What better way to do that than to be the official in the ring?
Then
1963.
you only get hit when it's an accident.
Only by accident, exactly. And much less frequently, although you're probably not as on guard when it does happen. So some pros, some cons.
I have to say, one thing that I will completely lose if we don't talk about it now early in his life is that it makes so much sense how much you have to be on guard for a hit for someone that was a goalie to become a boxing referee. That just feels so correct. That's such a natural move.
Oh, yeah. It's a natural transition. You got to get your body in there, right? You can't be afraid. You got to get in there, break it up when it needs to be broken up. And that's kind of like Mills Lane's style as a referee. He's very much the fair but firm. And, remember, he's only 5'7", about 150 pounds, but he makes no qualms about getting in there, breaking him up. If he thinks somebody's doing something dirty, he'll get in his face. We'll get more into that a little bit later. But in 1963, he starts officiating just like these small local bouts in Reno. He would fight one more time professionally in 1967. He would get a 6-round decision over Buddy Knox. So he finished his professional boxing career with a record of 10-1. And shortly after that fight, he's continuing to officiate fights, but he also is going to enroll at the University of Utah's law school. He would graduate with his law degree in 1970, go on to pass the bar. So we got kind of an Ed Hockley situation going on here, where he is a practicing lawyer who, in his free time, will get in the ring and officiate these matches. Shortly after graduating the bar in 1971, Mills gets his first championship bout. It goes 15 rounds between Betulio Gonzalez and Herbito Salavarria. They're fighting for the flyweight championship. They go the full 15. It's a draw. And this was the first of many championship bouts that Mills Lane would get to officiate. And he's also beginning his legal career in private practice at this time. Next year, in 1972, he gets a big step up. He gets to do his first heavyweight championship match. It's Muhammad Ali going against Bob Foster. Now, this is a notable fight for a couple of reasons. It's one of the few times that Ali was actually cut open during a fight. So an important thing for Mills Lane to keep his eye on. Make sure that cut doesn't get too nasty. The other thing that's notable is Bob Foster gets his ass kicked this whole fight. He gets knocked down 6 times before mercifully, thankfully, he gets knocked down a 7th time in the 8th round, and he doesn't make the count. One could wonder, should Mills Lane have called this after maybe the 4th time he got knocked down?
Well,
But
you've explained it. He was too busy focusing on Muhammad Ali's cut.
right, and let's remember the A side. We got to protect Muhammad here. As long as Muhammad Ali is okay, this Bob Foster folk, whatever. And Bob Foster is fine afterwards. Like, he got his ass kicked, but it was just because he wasn't as good as Muhammad Ali. In the years that follow, again, Mills is earning this firm but fair stature. He's a small referee, but he doesn't take any nonsense in the ring. We mentioned in the preamble, he got to referee over 100 championship fights, but I think one of the most impressive things is Mills Lane continued to officiate just these small local fighters in Reno, Nevada throughout his entire career. He never thought he was above it. He always said he loved doing those fights as much as any other. And a lot of the fighters from those fights look back on him very reverently. There's one particular story of a heavyweight boxer who is kind of getting knocked around. He gets knocked down again, and Mills would emphatically, count 1. Just stay down, man. 2. Come on, please. Just stay. 3. And the guy took Mills' advice and went on to never be a champion, but be that kind of like B+, A- level fighter. Got to fight a few contenders. And would always go back and thank Mills Lane for showing that grace and looking out for him in the ring. While he's progressing professionally as a referee, he's also progressing in his legal career. In 1980, he would become a prosecutor for Washoe County. And after 2 years of work with that, he would be elected as the DA in 1982. Over his 8-year tenure, he earned the nickname Maximum Mills because he had a perfect record as a prosecutor and would almost always secure a lengthy sentence.
That's not always a good thing.
Cool.
This might raise some concerns, and that's totally fair to say. However, after 8 years of serving as the DA, he was elected as a judge to the district court in 1990. And you might be worried, is he going to be favorable to the prosecution here? He is not. Much like he is as a referee, he is firm but fair with both sides. What he became most known for as a judge was whether you are the prosecution or the defense, if you show up late to his courtroom, he's going to fine you $25. Mills Lane is a man by the book. If the trial says it starts at 10 a.m., it starts at 10 a.m. If you show up at 10:05, you're wasting the court's time, $25 fine.
I got no particular problem with that. We can hold on to the prosecuting part for later.
Look, I get it. I understand the concerns. Ultimately, as a judge,
do we have a number
both
of
sides.
convictions?
I believe it was 24.
That's fewer
over
than
an
I would
8-year
have
span.
thought. That's
24
still not
murder.
great. That's fewer than
24 murder convictions over an 8-year span, and this is like Nevada we're talking about. Like crazy shit happens there.
I'm gonna defer to the legal counsel, but please go on. No matter what, please go on.
We will circle back to his legal career, and I do think it is in a much more positive light as we go on. Also, somebody's got to do it, man. Somebody's got to be the prosecutor.
Yeah.
But, he's balancing the two careers, the legal career, the boxing referee career. He's seemingly excelling in both. And obviously, we never want a referee to end up in the middle of the story. But a few times throughout the later end of his boxing officiating career, he would end up being in the story. And the first is November 6, 1993. It's Evander Holyfield versus Riddick Bowe 2. Do either of you know what happened in Evander Holyfield versus Riddick Bowe 2? And I'll tell you, nobody got their ear bit.
You know I don't. I'm sorry, but you know I don't.
Well, it's because it's not necessarily anything that happened in the ring. It's more what happened with a parachute in the scaffolding of the ring, because this was the Fan Man incident.
Oh, okay. I do know Fan Man.
Mills Lane is the official in the ring for Fan Man. Very quickly, sees the guy flying in, stops the fight, sends the fighters to their corners, protects everybody. It's worth saying, because I watched the video back and prepped for this, obviously. Fan Man got the shit beat out of him by, everybody.
I think Fan Man got beat up every single time he tried his shit.
Which, fair. I think pretty fair. They didn't kill him. They just beat him up a little bit. I think that's fair. Legally, funny enough, Fan Man's only punishment was a $200 fine for that incident. No jail time. Mills Lane was not the prosecuting attorney on that one. I have a feeling it might have been a little more steep if that were the case. This is the first notable incident. 1997, on February 7th, Oliver McCall is fighting against Lennox Lewis. Oliver McCall beat Lennox Lewis in their first bout. And in the rematch, Oliver McCall, quite simply, is not in the right mindset to be fighting. In the fourth round, about halfway through, he just drops his hands, and he's still like walking around the ring, and he's kind of dodging punches, but he has such a disconnected look on his face. And with about a minute left in that round, Mills goes, yo, like, do you want to fight? Like, he stops the fight and says, do you want to continue? Do you want to fight? And Oliver McCall just nods his head yes. He continues to not throw a punch, hands down by his side. He's having like a mental breakdown basically in the ring. When he goes back to his corner, he's openly crying as his corner is trying to encourage him. Mills Lane goes in, squats down, gets down to his level. He's on the stool and says, look, like, son, if you don't want to fight, you don't have to fight. We can stop it. Do you want to fight? And he says he wants to fight. He makes it about 20 seconds into the next round when Mills Lane's finally seen enough. Lennox Lewis is actually starting to land some punches. Oliver McCall doesn't go down at any point, but Mills knows he has a fighter in the ring that, for whatever reason, refuses to protect himself. He does the right thing. He does stop the fight. Oliver McCall would go on to continue to have a good boxing career after that, but it was a good moment of grace from Mills Lane. It is touching to see him, like, he gets down on his level in the corner to, look him in the eye kind of thing. And I thought that was like a good human moment. Just a bizarre circumstance. Something we've never seen before, never seen again in boxing. Later that year, this is Holyfield Tyson 2. This is the bite. And it's important to give a little pretext here because one thing that Evander Holyfield did a lot is he would kind of lean in and lean forward with his weight. And in so doing, he's not like winding his neck back and going forward with the headbutt, but kind of just leaning his body in very quick. Sometimes the heads are going to clash. It's accidental, but maybe not quite accidental. It was
a soft headbutt, Diaz. A soft headbutt, as the PGMOL would say.
Just a little headbutts there. Tell your mom it's okay. But so, like, that's kind of what leads to Tyson's frustration is he's seeing like, hey, like, I'm getting this soft headbutt. And Mills Lane is like, look, accidental, continue on. Like, you guys are fine. We get the initial bite. Mills Lane separates the fighters, sends them to their corners. And it's kind of chaos here for a second because Mills Lane's immediate assumption is this is going to be a medical stoppage because he bit his ear. And obviously he's disqualified. Holyfield is the winner. So he immediately says to the commissioner, he said, he bit his ear. He's done. I can see the bite mark. But the commissioner advises him, like, oh, before we go medical stoppage, check with the doctor first. So Mills Lane consults with the doctor, says, Doc, what do you see? What do you think? Can he continue? He says he can. So Mills Lane, very gracious, says, I'm just going to dock Tyson 2 points. This obviously pisses both corners off. Mike Tyson saying, what are you docking me 2 points for? Evander Holyfield saying, how the hell is this man not disqualified for biting my ear? What are we doing here?
How many points is my ear worth?
Only 2, apparently. It's funny because, like, he goes to Holyfield's corner first and he says, look, I'm docking him 2 points. The fight will continue. I'm docking him 2 points. And the Holyfield's corner is yelling. He's like, look, I get it. 2 points. He goes to Tyson's corner. He explains, look, I'm docking you 2 points. And Mike Tyson immediately starts to cut in with something like, oh, but Mills Lane cuts him off, looks him right in the eyes. And remember, Mills Lane is a 5'7", 150-pound man. Stares Tyson right in the eyes, pokes him in the chest, and says, bullshit, 2 points off. No fear at all. They resume. Mike Tyson bites him again about 20 seconds later after they resume. Mills Lane doesn't see it at first. It's on, like, from his angle, he's not able to see the bite. The round ends, but then he can see another bite mark. He can see the ear's a lot more bloody than it was right before. So in between rounds, Mills Lane says, all right, that's enough. This fight's called off. And obviously, all the ensuing chaos after that. Mike Tyson tried to get at Evander Holyfield. All of the officials crowded into the ring. The one thing from the picture of all the officials, I gotta say, I feel like the Reno 911 casting director took inspiration from that photo because it is remarkable the amount of fighters in the ring. Like there's one guy with like he's got like the coiffed hair and the mustache like dangle. There's at least 4 in there that it's like, oh yeah, this was like the clear inspiration for the show.
That was the casting photo.
Iconic. And I mean, look, Reno 911, Mills Lane, Pride of Reno, official in the ring. I'm just saying.
Okay, I think there's something there.
I think he might deserve a bit of a cut there. One more crazy fight that he officiated towards the end of 1998. He's actually doing a Bernard Hopkins fight, and Bernard Hopkins is fighting a guy named Robert Allen. Robert Allen is not on Bernard Hopkins' level, so he's kind of like resorting to like these cheap tactics. He's holding him in the clinch. He's punching when Mills says the break, and on one of these breaks, like Mills is like he's had enough of it, so he gets in there. He's pushing them both away from each other. And I guess Mills didn't know his own strength because he pushes Bernard Hopkins clear through the ring. Bernard Hopkins topples down to the ground and actually gets injured and has to take a no contest in this match because of the injuries that Mills Lane gave to him.
That seems like the worst mistake a ref could make other than not stopping a fight that ends up killing somebody.
Well, I would encourage both of you and I would encourage the listeners to look up the video of this fight because like it's not like it's a very light push. Like again, he's pushing them both away at the same time. I think Bernard Hopkins is probably more to blame. He tripped over his own feet, but the consequence of it is that he ends up outside of the ring and has to take a no contest. If you watch the video, Mills Lane did nothing wrong. He's a 150-pound, like 50-year-old man.
Mills Lane did nothing wrong.
Mills Lane did nothing wrong. A little after that.
I just watched it.
Yeah, it's not his fault.
Very far outside the ring, too. It is not close. He is down. Oh, my God.
But do you agree? The force applied is not... It shouldn't have been enough force to push Bernard Hopkins out of the ring.
No, he almost like punched Robert Allen in the face, but just kind of like elbowed Bernard Hopkins.
That's the thing too. Yeah, like he's pushing Robert Allen off. He's literally got his hand like on his face, like, dude, fuck you. Like you're doing these dirty punches. And he's kind of
I don't think it was the best way to push these two apart, but it should not have done that to Bernard Hopkins.
Thank you. And again, Xavier is the lawyer here. So like this is a binding opinion.
I'm watching the slow-mo above the ring view right now where he's just walking forward with both hands out, just shoving them. He's walking them both back into the corner and just Hopkins just flies through the ropes.
And it's so funny, too, because Bernard Hopkins would later get deja vu when I think it was Joe Smith Jr., a boxer, knocked him clean out of the ring in a similar fashion. So he had enough experience with that. But it is very impressive. We got to hand it to him. It was 30 years after his last professional fight, but Mills Lane still had one more knockout in him. And he did secure it against Bernard Hopkins.
Yeah, that other time that Bernard Hopkins got knocked out of the ring was probably less embarrassing.
Definitely less embarrassing. And that's one of the last fights that he ends up officiating. About 3 months later, he does a bout between Tommy Hitman Hearns and Jay Snyder. That would be his last match as a professional referee. And a big reason why he retired, he got an offer he couldn't refuse, as his family would later describe it, from Paramount to create Judge Mills Lane, which is an American courtroom show, much like your Judge Judys of the world. It cannot be overstated how great both intros for this show are. Season 1 is kind of just like a vaguely patriotic voiceover. Mills Lane does like the dramatic point at the camera as it zooms in on him. He's like out for a morning jog. And the voiceover is just this guy like, I'm actually just going to send this to you guys real quick because I need you both to watch it. It's 1 minute to watch both of them. Just watch it real quick.
In the ring and in the courtroom, he's fair and he's firm. A fighter and a family man. He's Mills Lane, America's judge.
I hate it.
You hate it?
I hate it. That is time and place. And we are not in the time. We are not in the time and place.
Did you watch the second
Those
one
are
with the singing
two
girls?
wildly different intros.
Oh, I only watched the first
Those
one.
are two insanely different introductions to a television show.
I guess I have to
You gotta
watch
watch
the
the second one,
The
Xavier.
fuck? Why is he running in front of a train?
Knows what's right, knows what's wrong, loves to say, let's get it on. Let's get it on. He's America's judge, and we love Judge Mills Lane.
Okay, the second one's hilarious.
That's what I like. Come on, like who doesn't want just three like nice American women singing a song about how much America loves you? Who doesn't want that? Famously, though, this wasn't his only appearances on television. He was also the referee for every single match of Celebrity Deathmatch, which, if you never watched that, it was a clay animation show that MTV put together. For the first run of the show, he did voice his own character, too. He didn't just give the blessing to do it. He was voicing his own character. And I think the most famous line there was,
I don't know.
with whatever crazy shenanigans were going on in the ring. This, of course, compared to his famous catchphrase as both a referee and before every case of Judge Mills Lane, let's get it on. He would say that before every case of Judge Mills Lane. He would say that before every championship bout that he did. He would also modify this in Judge Mills Lane, where if after he ruled, if you lost and you continued to argue, he would modify, but say in the same tone, your case is gone. Let's get it on. Your case is gone. A beautiful catchphrase.
I don't know. There's something weird about championship bouts and this daytime television show being treated with the same reverence. I'm not sure which one of them should have a different opening slogan, but one definitely should.
Yeah, maybe he could have workshopped something a little better for the courtroom. But look, America loved Mills Lane because he proved himself in the ring with two heavy fights, stared Mike Tyson right in the eye and said, you're acting like a piece of shit right now. It takes a lot, not only for him to do that, but for him to have the respect in the boxing world to get away with that. And that was very much kind of his ethos as an official. Another just example of the respect given to him across the sporting world. In 2002, when the Olympics were held in Salt Lake City, Mills Lane was one of the torchbearers, ran quite some distance with it. He stuck to his boxing training regimen his entire life, basically. Always got out for a run at some point during the day, hit the bag for however many minutes, even well after he retired as a boxer, stayed committed to staying in shape. He's the torchbearer for the 2002 Winter Olympics. Unfortunately, in March of 2002, Mills Lane does suffer a catastrophic stroke, which leaves him largely paralyzed. He's unable to speak. But thankfully, he did still give his blessing to use his character in Celebrity Deathmatch. It was voiced by by one of the other cast members.
I'm
thereafter.
so glad that they made sure to take care of that matter of utmost importance on his deathbed.
Well, here's the thing. He suffers that stroke in 2002. December 27, 2004, the city of Reno would declare it to be Mills Lane Day. In 2006, he would make his first and only public appearance following his stroke when the city of Reno opened the Mills B. Lane Justice Center. It was a new courthouse in Reno. It housed the Reno Municipal Court and the Washoe County District Attorney's Office. So he was there for that dedication of the building. In 2013, Mills Lane would be elected into the Boxing Hall of Fame. And none of these honors were posthumous because Mills Lane was a fighter to the end, as his family would describe it as well. He would hold on for 20 years after that stroke before last December, on December 6, 2022, Mills Lane did pass away at the age of 85. So often, officials only end up in our minds if they fuck up in some egregious way. But for Mills, he became famous because of how well he handled some of the most absurd circumstances in the history of boxing, whether it's a guy with a parachute flying into the ring during a championship bout, Whether it's a heavyweight boxer having a mental breakdown and Mills Lane being there to protect him, whether it is the countless low-level fights in Reno that he continued to officiate throughout his career, or if it is Mike Tyson deciding to bite a chunk out of somebody's ear. No matter where it was, no matter what it was, Mills Lane was firm, but he was fair. He was MTV's referee. He was America's judge. And I think today he should be our guy.
This does bring into question the character judgment of both America and MTV, which may be wanting, but our judgment certainly is not. And I do look forward to passing judgment on him. However, we can't do that quite yet, can we, Diaz?
We do have one more. And Xavier, I'm very curious to see who you brought to the table.
I have to say, I did Google search America's Judge. We did not see Mills Lane come up. It is Judge Ross, who is apparently America's Judge.
Who the fuck is Judge
Judge
Ross?
Ross?
Just Google America's Judge right now.
No, I don't need to Google America's Judge. I know who America's Judge is in my heart, Xavier.
Is it Judge Judy?
No, it's Judge Joe Carter, but that's beside the point.
Who's the judge from the Amanda Show? Because that's my America's Judge.
I mean, it's definitely inspired by Judge Judy.
Trudy, I believe.
Yeah, Judge Trudy, I think. That's
Send in the Dancing Lobsters. But you guys are right. There's one more person that needs to be talked about today. And you know what? We are suffering from a big lack of representation in this hall. There is a class of individuals that we have not really shown enough love to, and I'm here to rectify that injustice. Because we have a big lack of Welshmen in the hall.
Welshman is not where I thought this was going to go. Okay.
What better way to fix this grave injustice than by talking about the man known as rugby's funniest referee, Nigel Owens?
Well, he's not Tom Jones, so it's a Welshman I am less familiar with.
You love a Nigel.
So Nigel was born on June 18th, 1971, in a village that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Instead, we'll just spell it out as Mynyddcerrig. And that's in southwest Wales. And well, that's the thing. I've listened to Welsh speakers, and what you think it might sound like if you spell it out is not how it actually sounds in Welsh. It's not even close, so I wasn't going to try to butcher it. So any Welsh names, I'm going to just, go past that because I don't want to do a big injustice to the wonderful Welsh people in the Welsh language. So Nigel started refereeing rugby matches in 1987 after his sports teacher suggested he take it up after a school game. His first match was as a 16-year-old. He refereed the under-15s match between Carmarthen and Pembrokeshire. From there, he continued to move up the ladder in Wales until he eventually made his European debut during the 2000-2001 European Challenge Cup season. This is essentially the second-tier European competition equivalent to the Europa League in soccer, when he refereed a match between London Irish, yes, there is a team named the London Irish, and Pacenza on January 21st.
I mean, look, we have the Irish at Notre Dame, so if we can have Irish here, I say London can have it too.
There is a very famous reason why London and Ireland might not get along, but
I can picture why there was maybe historically a reason where Irish people could only play on one team, for instance.
Hey, it is working and student exiles from the home countries founded the London Irish in the late 1800s. They have been around for a very long time. Not going to talk shit about the London Irish, but I will talk about Nigel Owens because he continued to show that he is really, really good at what he did. At this point, he's one of only 3 Welsh referees in all of Europe, despite rugby being very, very popular in Wales. And the next year, he makes his debut in the Heineken Cup, aka their Champions League, refereeing Calvisano and Perpignan. Shortly thereafter, he then makes his Celtic League debut. For those who don't know, there are 3 main European rugby leagues. There's the Premiership, which is England. There is the T14, which is France, and then there's the Celtic League, which is Scotland, Northern Ireland, Ireland, Wales, Isle of Man, and weirdly, like, Italy sometimes like competes in it. I don't know why, but sometimes they just add the Italians. But mostly, the home nations other than England.
Yeah, Irish and Italians, very like mid 1900s Brooklyn.
Pretty much. And he's really, really good at what he does. And one thing that people might not know is that rugby refs, they're mic'd up for full transparency, and they provide clear and transparent explanations of all their decisions to the players and the crowd, so people know what's going on.
In the words of Peter Griffin, why are we not funding this?
There have been many, many attempts to get European soccer to at least just do the thing that rugby refs do and explain the decisions. And they did trial it, if you remember, at the Women's World Cup, where after the referees would go to VAR, they would then turn on a mic and then explain the decision to the crowd. That was pulled from rugby. But because of this, people get to know Nigel Owens watching on TV and, in the crowd. And he becomes pretty well known for not only being able to manage games very well, but also a lot of one-liners and quips back to the players. He doesn't take shit from anybody, but he's pretty jovial, pretty fun. There's an instance where he's refereeing a game between a Georgian team, because there is a Georgian team that competes in the European competitions called Black Lion. He's talking to the Georgian captain, and the guy starts pretending that he can't understand him. He's like, "How many games have I refereed of yours where I've talked to you before? If you pretend you can't hear me, I'm just gonna talk louder." And again, everyone can hear this because it's very funny. The Georgian guy starts laughing.
Reminds me of remember Sammy Sosa when he got called before Congress about steroids? He tried to pull the "I don't speak English" after many years of documented him speaking English.
Yeah, there's a lot of interviews published with you, buddy.
It's very good. There's, again, the Rugby World Cup YouTube channel has a video that is just what they call Nigel Owens' top 10 moments that has over 1 million views. Could you imagine just liking a referee so much that you want to you would look at a YouTube video of his quips over 1 million times? It's very interesting, and it's one of those things where he is just genuinely really good at what he does, to the point where everybody likes him. And I think players like him because he's fair. There was a time where he was talking to a captain, said, "Hey, I've been watching what you guys have been doing. You're getting pretty testy out there. Go talk to everyone right now. We're going to take a timeout. You're going to talk to your team. You're going to let them know, calm down, because next time someone has a hit, I'm going to consider it deliberate. Someone's going to the sin bin for 10 minutes. So, he manages games in the ways that you would want a ref to use common sense. And that style lets it continue to move up the ladder. Eventually, he starts reffing international games. His first international was Portugal versus Georgia during the European Nations Cup First Division, another second-tier international competition, and gets his first full international, first-tier international in a Ireland tour of Japan. By 2005, 2006, he becomes a regular on the top division, both in Europe and on the international stage. And then in 2007, Nigel Owens publicly comes out as gay in an interview with the Wales on Sunday. He said, "It's such a big taboo to be gay in my line of work. I had to think very hard about it because I didn't want to jeopardize my career." But he said he did it because he had contemplated suicide as a youngster and just couldn't live that way again and had to be himself, and felt that he'd reached a point where he hoped people would understand. He was the first man in professional rugby, either player, official, staff side, to ever come out as gay. And thing is, people like him. So even though there was some abuse from fans. The reaction was actually overwhelmingly positive, which is great. And later that year, he became the only Welsh referee to be part of the pool at the 2007 Rugby World Cup, where he ends up refereeing 3 pool stage matches, which is like their group stage. And then after that year, he gets named the Gay Sports Personality of the Year by the Stonewall Awards in London. So pretty good year for Nigel Owens. Next year, he referees all 6 rounds of the Heineken Cup pool stage, refs the quarterfinals, semifinals, and the final, becoming only the 3rd Welsh referee to ever ref Heineken Cup final. And that is something that he's going to do a lot of. He ends up refereeing 6 different Heineken Cup finals, which is the most ever. In 2011, he is a pretty well-rounded individual. And as we already talked about, he is pretty well known for his quips and his one-liners. He is made a member of the Orsedd of Bards, spelled Gorsedd, which is a society of Welsh language poets, writers, musicians, and others who have contributed to the Welsh language and to public life in Wales.
That's so fucking rad, man. I wish there was anything as cool as the Welsh relationship to their language in America.
This group is pretty wild, as all the members are technically called druids, and they have different colored robes that reflect their contribution to society.
Fuck yes.
The head of an Orsedd is known as the Archdruid, which is the Archdruid, who wears a golden robe and is elected for a term of 3 years and is responsible for conducting Orsedd ceremonies during the Eisteddfod week, which is held to honor literary achievements amongst Welsh poets and prose writers. So, yeah, Nigel Owens is a druid. We have best rugby ref in the world. We have funniest rugby ref in the world, and druid.
Presumably the only rugby ref that is also a druid.
As far as I can tell, the only rugby ref that is also a druid. So in 2013, he refereed his 100th Pro 12 game, becoming the most appointed Welsh referee at international level. During the 2014-15 season, he becomes the most appointed referee ever at European Rugby Champions Cup level with 80. So now, again, he's only been reffing at a high level for 13 years, and he's already broken every record. 2015 World Cup, he's the best. So he gets to ref some of the biggest games, including France versus Ireland, New Zealand versus Australia. Becomes only the 2nd Welsh referee to ref a World Cup final, and the 1st in over 30 years. And wins the World Rugby Ref Award at the 2015 World Rugby Awards. He is the best. And speaking of the 2015 World Cup, one of the other games that he reffed during the pool stage was the site of another one of his more famous moments. He was refereeing a match between Scotland and South Africa that was played at St. James Park. During the match, a Scottish player blasted a kick downfield and then went down as if he got poleaxed. But Owens got a great view of it, correctly noticed that he dove. He was not touched whatsoever. Diving in rugby is possibly the biggest no-no that you can have. And Owens goes up to this guy who's claiming for a foul. And he said,
I was looking at it. He was committed in the air. There was nothing wrong with it. Dive like that again and come back here in 2 weeks and play. Not today. Watch it.
And everyone starts laughing at this play. The entire crowd is laughing at this guy. And I hope that Scottish guy did come back in 2 weeks, because as Owens correctly pointed out, it was 2 weeks until Newcastle had another home game. And he would have seen a 6-2 Newcastle win over Norwich. Diaz, do you know who scored 4 goals for Newcastle that day?
This was 2017?
2015.
2015. So we're past Bob, we're past Cisse, we're past Ben Arfa, not Dwight Gale. Who would have been? Who's our striker?
It's not a striker.
That would have been before John Joe. Hit me.
Genie Wijnaldum.
Oh my God. Yeah, he played 10 games for us.
And had a very good one, it sounds like.
He scored 11 total goals for Newcastle, 4 in one game. So, probably a good game to go to. Later that same year, Owens is also named the Gay Sports Personality of the Decade by the Stonewall Award Society. The year after that, 2016, gets appointed a member of the Order of the British Empire for services to sport. He's an MBE. Maybe one day he could be a knight. We'll see. But he continues to ref a little bit after that. Makes his 150th Pro 12 appearance on April 15, 2017. Gets his 100th international match a couple months later in a game between France and Italy. And then pretty soon after says, I'm retiring immediately. Nobody has a divine right to go on forever. And says, just out of nowhere, he's like, I'm done with this now. And leaves.
I'm pretty tired.
I think I'll go home now.
Well, pretty much. You know what he wanted to go home and do?
Get married?
Farm.
Hell yeah!
He lives back home in Wales where he has a farm. And he is a farmer now. He is a druid farmer. And just does farming stuff with his long-term partner. And it's fucking phenomenal. I watched the Farmer's Guardian podcast did a video podcast with him 4 months ago. Nigel Owens switching life on the rugby pitch to life in the farm. And as you may expect, it is just this guy in a Wales hoodie with a coffee mug in his hand, standing in front of a bunch of hay bales, talking about farming.
Sportsman, druid, gay, hell of a bear.
It's great. I love it. He's also done a couple other things. He presented a documentary for the BBC about eating disorders for men, and it was open about the fact that he suffered from bulimia and highlighting about how his refereeing at the Rugby World Cup was a significant trigger for his eating disorder and how it's important for men to be open about these things. He presents on Welsh language chat shows, and he hosts his own Welsh quiz program called The Minute to Go. Yeah, so at this point in his life, he just kind of does some quiz stuff and some Welsh language stuff, does his druid job, and then goes home and farms with his partner. That just feels like a phenomenal life, and I very much enjoyed learning about Nigel Owens, and I hope that regardless of what happens after this, that our listeners enjoyed learning about it too.
I mean, I don't know about the listeners. I did. Thank you, Xavier.
Nigel Owens.
He is a guy, but let's not get too crazy with any nicknames because we do need to deliberate between these three guys. I think I'm going to start with, I think, a concession. This may have been, my choice of going with, baseball to begin with, a sport that has always struggled to promote its stars. And if it struggles to promote its stars, how's it going to promote one of four guys who, when he's in his biggest position, is wearing a mask over his face? I am happy to have presented Dave Phillips, but I think the two that you brought forward, while sure I've got my interpretation of officials as ideally being the background, you just brought characters that I think outdid the character of mine. And I think this is going to end up being a discussion between those two, Mills Lane and Nigel Owens.
I mean, the tough thing, I guess, with Dave is it's like, he's there for a lot of cool shit.
Yeah.
But did he do a lot of cool shit? Is what it comes down to.
And I think that was what I wanted to get across the most, but I think that has fallen short in terms of which of these guys stands out in their field the most.
This is tough because we have boxing judge or boxing ref, actual judge, rugby ref, druid farmer. And I like all of those combinations. But I also just like saying that this guy's a druid, like official position as a druid. And also, Wales is just cool as hell. I don't know what it is, but I've always liked Welsh stuff.
I think the thing about both of these guys that makes them so much interesting than Dave Phillips is they do both kind of, there is some more element of the thumb being put on the scale by them. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. As we were going through Mills Lane, I was starting to consider that. But the fact that like both him and Nigel Owens are doing that in this kind of, much like a good doctor, they're engaging in preventative care as referees. They're often trying to avoid things getting to the point where they have to resort to the last options and the last uses of their power as officials. One strike perhaps against Mills Lane. He might have too much of a career as an athlete before all of this. Even Dave, played in college a little bit, but both Dave and Nigel know what they're about. They know that it is officialing for life.
I think that's fair, but I think also boxing is the sport that an official benefits most by having played it before. Like basketball, you need to have good cardio and you need to know what a foul looks like. Rugby, the rules and regulations, again, you need great cardio. But specifically with boxing, I feel like knowing the psychology of a fighter and being able to pick up on those like small little things that might be a little off and get ahead of calling a fight before something disastrous happens. I do think that is to the benefit of a boxing referee. And also, I mean, you said it first, I'll say it again, James, the reigning defending NCAA welterweight champion as a result of his earlier career.
That is certainly true, though if we want to go for like fun honorifics, we do have the only referee in rugby in history, as far as we know, that is also a druid. So both have one of those silly titles to claim, and I think that's kind of offsetting penalties.
I think one of the things that fascinates me the most, and I wish I could be a fly on the wall, is that Nigel Owens is 16 years old, and his gym teacher says, you ought to be a referee. That has to have been like, son,
what
like
do you give off as a 16-year-old?
I don't think you're good enough to play it, but you could probably referee it. Or was it like, no, you have such a strict sense of justice and you're so good at like ruling it. You need to drop everything and become a referee right now.
Oh, no.
Because either way, I'm like, to be a 16-year-old and be told that by a gym teacher and then be like, you know what? Yeah. And then become the best in the world is one of the weirdest, like funniest things I could think of.
Gym teacher, new talent.
Nigel Owens sounds like he was a teacher you forgot to collect the homework type student. That's what that sounds like to me.
Just say you hate druids, Diaz. It's fine.
Listen, I have no problem with druids. I have problems with the kids that remind the teachers that homework had to be handed in because I frequently didn't do it.
Hey, if it was in Welsh, I would give you a pass for that because I could not read that either.
Here's the thing. I'm trying to... It looks like I am finding myself in the decider position this week, which it being a category that I picked is perfectly fair. The issue with the argument is I'm so nervous of accidentally, in this case, giving some kind of bias to lawyer Xavier's argument. I'm trying so hard to not hear that. And I think I've found Diaz my equivalent of our silly deciding factor here. And I want you all to bear with me for a moment. Xavier, if I'm not mistaken, you said at one point that some sporting league has an official top 10 Nigel Owens compilation, right?
Yes.
Could you give
the
me
Rugby World Cup?
Could you give me the views count of that, please?
Yeah, hold on.
And Diaz, while he's finding that, would you mind Googling or YouTube, whatever? Go to YouTube, Mills Lane top 10 highlights, and we're just going to take the first result, and if that has more views than Nigel Owens, then Mills Lane wins. And if Nigel Owens has more, Nigel Owens wins.
Oh, there's so many Nigel. Okay, so the Rugby World Cup has 2 on Nigel Owens. One is Rugby's Funniest Referee, Nigel Owens' Best Moments and Quotes. That's 1.3 million. Then they have another Nigel Owens Hilarious One-Liners, which is another million. Then there's one that just says 10 minutes of Nigel Owens being Nigel Owens, which is 1.9 million.
The one you cited initially, I believe, was that 1.3 million.
Yeah, the 1.3 is the one that I cited initially.
We're sticking with 1.3. That's the number to beat.
I searched Mills Lane top 10 highlights on YouTube. The first result is the most bizarre fights officiated by referee Mills Lane. It has 5.4 thousand views. And what is it Mills Lane's fault that he doesn't have an entire organization propping him up? And also, We have all of this video these days. Mills Lane is from a forgotten era. This is an unfair comparison. This is an unjust comparison.
Ear. We have video of the ear, though.
How many views does that video have?
He is not the main character of the ear.
Which is the whole point of being an official. And yet here we have this guy, Nigel Owens, being a main character of all his YouTube videos. Mills Lane is only the main character in one show. And it's Judge Mills Lane because they gave him his own show because he's a better guy than Nigel Owens.
They also gave Nigel Owens his own. They gave Nigel Owens his own show for that reason too. That's not a good thing.
You're right.
Has he ever been on Celebrity Deathmatch? Has Nigel Owens ever been on Celebrity Deathmatch?
He's been on Desert Island Discs.
That doesn't sound like Celebrity Deathmatch to me, Xavier.
There's a lot of offsetting penalties, and I have to admit, I think I've been won away by my previous criteria because I think truly that passion has overwhelmed me. But Diaz, there is one thing that we said we were going to discuss. Let's go back one more time to a large number of convictions, murder convictions. Speak on that just a little bit.
I mean, look, no guy is perfect. And if we said any guy was perfect, we would be full of it. Somebody has to be the prosecutor. There's two sides to every story. He had to choose the side to tell one story. And I think the fact that he then moves on from being a prosecutor to being a fair but firm judge, not just on TV, but also in real courtrooms, and that he was lauded by both sides for his performance as a judge, I think shows that he did not take the vindictive route that perhaps we might think that some prosecuting, some DAs might take. Mills Lane was firm, but he was fair. If you murdered somebody, he was going to try to get you put in jail. But he was fair, and that's why he was elected judge, and that's why he has the courthouse named after him in Reno now. His own contemporaries recognize him.
Xavier, I mean, you are the lawyer here. Do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, I mean, my rebuttal is prosecutors are bad people, and my guy's a druid, and he's the greatest rugby ref of all time. We had the YouTube clip that you said was going to decide it, where he won by what, a factor of 1,000, if not more.
Yeah,
that's 500. That's one of those results like when Puerto Rico voted like 98% to be independent because nobody came out to vote for it. It is
so you're saying nobody looked at Mills Lane, and you're saying that should be pro for you. That nobody looked at his highlight package.
I'm saying it's such an overwhelming number that it is nonsense to even consider it. That is what I'm saying.
That is not a good reason to explain your failure.
I think
my failure. What? I'm sorry. If I started a week ago and I just started fucking reloading the Mills Lane video, I would win. Is that what we're saying? That's absurd. That's a stupid thing to say. Mills Lane. Here's my closing statement. Mills Lane is a staple of American culture as indicated by his show and his everlasting presence on Celebrity Deathmatch. He is a guy. If we very simply go back to what the root of this show is, the bar test. Mills Lane passes the bar test. He's a guy. If he doesn't get in now, whatever. But we all know that if we all say, who's the boxing referee guy? Mills Lane. Oh, who's that union referee guy? What the fuck is rugby union? That's the answer you get in an American bar.
My last statement here. My last statement. Diaz says
it's kind of fun being in the middle. Like, and for the first 3 minutes of this, I was on pins and needles, and I was like, I hold so much power.
Diaz says that Mills Lane is a staple of American culture. Nigel Owens was selected by Wales culture to be a druid because of his contributions to Welsh culture. Like, if you're going to say one of these people is a staple of the culture of their country, it is the guy who was specifically a druid for that reason.
I'm not saying that he's a staple of the culture of his country. I'm saying that he is a staple of the culture of our country, Xavier. That's what I'm saying. He is America's judge. He should be America's guy. The power does not rest with me, however, and I rest.
If he showed up when Google said America's judge, maybe I would agree with you, but you know what? Judge Ross is apparently America's judge. I'm sorry.
We've already said it's Judge Joe Carter. I believe fundamentally that Mills Lane is the better guy. I want to say that. In cooling down, what I need to recognize is I did set a parameter, and we have resorted to Chat GPT, and we have resorted to another silly thing here. And I'm not gonna lie, I regret setting that parameter. I do regret it, but I said it out loud, and I do think I need to stick with that in the end.
Look, sometimes we get it wrong. And, maybe Mills Lane shouldn't have put murderers in jail. Maybe that is why we're here now. Maybe that's why he didn't win.
I think Mills Lane, it's a situation where he got docked 2 points. No, I have no justification for this other than fuck, man. I did say that there was a parameter we were going to go by.
Don't let Xavier bully you into sticking by your words.
It's all right, Diaz. You have Delaware is coming to FBS. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah,
what do I care about Delaware anymore?
Now that they're FBS, are they now rivals?
I mean, they need to play a game against each other again first, right? I don't know. I look forward to those silly petty fights with my mom. I enjoyed this silly petty fight, which there's been a stoppage to the bout. It has been called. Time of death is 7:23 p.m. on Thursday night. So dies the case of Mills Lane, who is the superior guy, as admitted by 2 of the 3 members of this panel. But because we said some silly bullshit, we're going to stick to some silly bullshit. None of this is to discredit Nigel Owens. It is a fantastic story. We do love that he is a staple of the Welsh culture. We do love that he is firm but fair. I think they said that about somebody else first. But he's firm but fair as a rugby official, and he is now firmly and unfairly in our hall. Welcome Nigel Owens to the Hall, guy.
What would the episode about officials be if it did not end with everyone being mad about a stupid technicality in the rule books?
First Druid in the hall.
I'm just saying, we put this one to the viewers. Kev is beside himself that I didn't argue harder right now.
Kev, I'll make you an honorary Druid of the podcast if you agree with me.
And Diaz, no, I'm sorry. I want to take a moment before we go to our goodbyes and thank yous. Please, for the love of God, do not credit yourself with not fighting hard enough on this one.
Gave it the old college try.
You did. We ourselves, I think, all gave it a good college try here, but we are now wrapping up. And before we do so, as always, we want to give thanks to our producer, Craig, and the coders behind him, to our musical director, Don Ham, for our lovely theme music. I want to just thank Retro Sheet again and the people who decided it was important to track all of the nitty gritty details they have about every single ejection that has ever taken place in these umpires' careers. It's incredible. I'm so glad that we live in a world where those nerds exist. And I'm so glad that we live in a world where you, dear viewers, exist and come to join us once again. If you listen to us on Spotify, hope we made your app. Apparently we did make some of y'all's. That's what the data tells me on the other end. So that's great and that's awesome. And we appreciate you all joining us. Feel free to bring more into the fold with all of our information that you can find and share at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. I'm all out of fuel, guys. Anything else?
Nothing for me.
Fuck Kylian Mbappe.
Fuck Kylian Mbappe. I'm James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz. And as Mills Lane always said, let's guy it on.
The one last thing I want to share about Temple basketball. Let me tell you how NPR my Thanksgiving is. I had multiple people who are Columbia students or alumni razz on me for ruining Temple's undefeated season. You know what it's like to have fucking Columbia guys come in and be like, punk.
Columbia's building a solid program. I got to give it to them.
Go Lions.
But it is still, yeah.